The experience of young people and the educational system has become so fragmented that we have to find a way of putting it back together.
It's about evidence, and I believe the evidence is that if pupils have got strong relationships, then the outcomes will follow.
The power of the student-teacher relationship can make a phenomenal difference to young people's mental health as well as their learning capacity.
I think it is massively overlooked, but it's the thing that actually gets teachers up in the morning. You know, it's the thing that makes them enjoy their job.
I think relationships are important for everything.
Building good relationships isn't an add-on. It takes time and it takes effort.
Just to say, I'm the teacher, therefore you will listen, isn't in itself enough.
Relationships in schools make a massive difference.
The powerful messages of this research are, if you prioritise relationships, then academic outcomes will go up.
What attracted us to Relational Schools was the fact that they were going to provide evidence for how those relationships would work, and that would allow us to basically take what we believe in and make it better.
Our interest is in building strong relationships in school so you build a strong society. The focus of Relational Schools has always been to find examples of best practice that demonstrate outstanding outcomes in a broader sense and tell the world about that. I'm Robert Lowe. I'm Education Research Director of Relational Schools Project, which is a developed research project around how we build strong, robust, healthy relationships in schools. I started off in 2002 as an English teacher. Then was a head of English, I was an assistant head of sixth form, I was an assistant principal of a large college in Suffolk. And throughout that time, the one thing that was the most important thing to me was being a teacher. And actually, when I went for an interview at the large college in Suffolk for assistant head, I got to the end of day 2 and I was given 60 seconds in the last panel interview to tell the principal, convince the principal why she should hire me. And I said to her that however well I'd done over a range of leadership and management tasks the last 2 days, whatever someone had said about me in a reference, the one skill that I would bring to the school was my ability to teach. It was the thing that had defined me throughout my career. I've been always regarded as an outstanding teacher. And the reason I was thought to be an outstanding teacher was the relationships I built with young people, that I knew how to connect with young people so that behaviour management became entirely incidental. When I went to listen to somebody talk about relational thinking, the idea of building a society through a concentration, a policy concentration in the area of relationships, in this context, education, this chimed with me. And I couldn't believe, actually, that the narrative in education had become so narrow. The focus on human relationships had entirely been lost in my mind. And it's what drew me to that work.
The most difficult learning about yourself, learning about your life, can only happen in a secure relationship. And relationships in schools make a massive difference. The power of the student-teacher relationship can make a phenomenal difference to young people's mental health as well as their learning capacity.
If you accept that when you play out in schools the kinds of relationships we're seeing, you often see that impact later on in society. You get those relationships later on. And that has impacts on those students who go on to engage in criminalised behaviour, end up in prison. If you play out strong, connected relationships, one would hope that you see that in society. Our interest is in building strong relationships in school so you build a strong society, not just so young people can hold down a job.
We do know certain characteristics that help young people to learn effectively. If they feel they belong, if they feel they belong to a classroom, if they feel they belong to a school, and schools send out very strong messages about who matters to us.
I think
think it's quite a sensitive topic because you're dealing with personalities, you're dealing with interactions between human beings, and to state that that is one of the most important things in a school at once is ridiculous, but it's ridiculous that it's not done as well.
The focus of Relational Schools has always been to find examples of best practice. We could have gone into schools where academic performance was lower, where schools were struggling, but ultimately we wanted to go to those schools who, despite the sort of dominant policy narrative, were doing things radically differently. So I wanted to explore what was the impact of the relationship quality between teacher and student, and what did it lead to?
Samuel Ward Academy is in Haverhill. It's a school of around about 1,250 students, aged from 11 through to 18. It's an outstanding academy, strong focus on relationships, outstanding teaching, and actually ensuring that we make really confident individuals.
It's a very comfortable, very successful learning environment. Everybody gets along with everybody, and there's always someone there for you whenever you need anything.
Why do we get involved in relational schools? I think it's very simple. I think that what Relational Schools is trying to unpick is something that we hold very dear. We believe here that the relationships are really important.
We measure relationships using something called the Relational Proximity Framework. It's a series of questions that enables two individuals or two groups to comment on the relationship one with each other.
You're going to do a survey on friendships. It's like, right, okay, what can you really ask about friendships? Give you a name, open the booklet, and you sort of look and you start to think in depth of what these friendships actually are, and you start to think below the surface.
We ask them to respond on a Likert type scale of agree or strongly disagree with those statements as they're put to them. We take that data, we aggregate it, and we comment on a number of things, on the relational health across the school, across a year group, across a group of pupils in a form, by gender, by pair, and in the teacher's case, that relationship as felt as a class as a whole, how they respond to their teacher.
It's about evidence, and I believe the evidence is that if pupils have got strong relationships, they believe in themselves, they're confident individuals, then the outcomes will follow.
At Samuel Ward, because they prioritise human scale environments, small tutor groups, schools within schools, a focus on the relational elements of education, our questionnaire surveys here are designed to understand to what extent that's having an impact. Are students better connected? Do they feel better connected to each other, to the school? And to what extent does that have an impact on their academic outcomes? This questionnaire particularly looks at student-to-student relationships, both between the boys and the boys, the girls and the girls, and between each other.
The ways that boys talk to each other and the ways that girls talk to each other, and that's so different that it finds hard to mix when they come out of their friendship groups.
I think it's probably on many levels good that girls and boys are different. Can schools change things? Yeah, that's what they're there for. They're there to challenge things. But I think what's useful is that in making the reasons for those differences explicit, then thoughts and actions can be put into place to challenge those.
When we went to Sam Ward, we saw that what we call the multiplexity score, the many-stranded nature of the relationship. The more context you know people in, the more you know about them, the more likely you are to have a rich, deep, broad relationship with them. We saw at Sam Ward, their multiplexity score was extremely high.
I thought they were things you could see on the surface, spending a day in the school. I thought they were things you could see without a questionnaire, and obviously now doing it, I realise that there's a lot of questions and things that you need to build a relationship, and I didn't realise there was that many things. To look at it on paper and to understand it on a factual level was interesting.
Our research is finding that student relationships in traditional pastoral structures in the United Kingdom are tending to lead to relationships that look quite fragmented. And they become more fragmented as children progress through school. In fact, in some structures, by the time they get to year 11, the key domain that we look at is commonality, that is their shared goals, their values, their purpose. And what we found was that they were so fragmented and individuated, there was no sense of community or fraternity between these people. I mean, some people might say, well, this is great, they're young, they're just about to go out into the world, how brilliant that they're now independent. But actually, this wasn't independence this was seen, this wasn't individuation, this was high degrees of individualism. This is my world, my grades, and the system encourages that. This very individualistic mindset around what education means to you.
You can't treat people as individuals and ask them to perform and think that that doesn't impact on how young people see each other and therefore on bullying.
Why would you care about other people? It's not a team endeavour. But when we move to schools, like Samuel Ward, for example, where you have a visionary executive head who had prioritise human scale environments. He prioritised schools within schools, small class sizes, so that people at least had the perception of being known and valued. So the results reflected that. These were young people who, they were so data might suggest, were projected to do rather more badly than they did. They were making progress that other schools weren't, despite, and importantly despite, the material context, deprivation context, and often relational deprivation context this school sits in. And that was an important moment for me, because actually what it showed was that when you prioritise relational thinking in your design and organisation of a school, so the benefits were seen amongst the student community.
How intentionally do you create the systems and structures and processes in the design to enable pupils to become confident and responsible as well as successful learners?
Definitely trying to break down the big school into smaller schools, all the way down into small groups, tutor groups of 15.
We created human scale structures, and that meant looking at things physically like the building, outside spaces. It meant looking at the size of groups, the size of communities within the school. It meant considering things like reflection as a deliberate policy.
Elsewhere, what students were telling us was both qualitatively through our interviews and also through the data, was that they spoke often, had opportunities to talk a lot, but said nothing. They had no sense of shared story. They didn't know things about each other. They had very little shared purpose and goal. But at Samuel Ward School, their face-to-face contact was increased to the point where their conversation was far more functional.
Enrichment after school, which takes place within the school day. We have 64 activities that take place. It gives students an opportunity to mix outside of the relationships that they've already formed in their classes, their relationships that they form in their tutor groups. And so there's quite a complex web of relationships that are formed through all of those things.
Their ability to share story and know each other in different contexts because of the focus on enrichment of the school was off the Richter scale. We'd not seen relationships this broad and deep. Their sense of equality between the relationship, the idea that even though they might be unequal in many respects, that they felt respected, they felt equal, was the data was shouting that to us. And most importantly, that as they progressed through the school, their community and fraternity was growing too. Their relationships were growing. They were building stronger, deeper, richer relationships, which over time were growing as well. The key for me was that the bullying data here was also in decline, which is a sign that children, young people, were well connected, that they knew each other well, and it was having positive benefits, both on their academic outcomes and their well-being. They were happier. and healthier as a result, which is what education should be about.
Where we've got to now, and what relational schools have brought to the table really, is a very concrete set of diagnostic data, which has thrown up some very interesting patterns for the school, but actually has informed, or is beginning, I should say, to inform where we take it next.
So I'm interested in this in a school-wide macro level. How do you organise, structure your school where you put relationships at the design? But I'm also interested in classroom practice. What does it really mean to be a teacher? What is education? What is pedagogy? And for me, it is putting relationships at the heart of everything the school does and everything the teacher does. And that's why we need to go to Linton Village College and then really explore their teachers to student relationships there. We selected Linton Village College for two reasons. One was my engagement with a number of people at the school who were highly committed to research and development. Were practitioners who were outstanding in their own right, but also who were hungry to continue to improve and do so through engagement with research. And that's why Linton Village College is an outstanding school. It's great as an outstanding school because the students achieve academic scores which in a Cambridgeshire context put them as one of the best schools in Cambridgeshire. And also because they're thought to be a school where teaching and learning is outstanding. It's why the Ofsted grade them outstanding, it's why they are a teaching school, it's why they're building a large teaching school network, they call that CASA. So we went to a school where teaching and learning was the heart of everything they did. And as a result, we were able to engage with a number of practitioners who they described as outstanding and were able to talk about our policy agenda in the context of that outstanding environment.
Linton is a great environment for everyone.
There's not very many of us. There's only 800 students, which is nice because you get small class sizes.
I think it's a great atmosphere, to be honest. Everyone always is happy and there's a nice buzz around the school and just a happy environment to come into.
This is an 11 to 16 village college. It's a comprehensive school, so we have the full range of ability and a really varied range of family backgrounds. So it's a full and proper comprehensive. Very few people in our community send their children to private schools. It is a pleasant part of the country. There's not a lot of social deprivation here. There are in patches, but it's by and large slightly advantaged in terms of its area.
I think often with the subject of teacher-pupil relationships, some of it seems really obvious and it feels a bit indulgent sometimes, exploring a topic where you think you already know what the research is going to reveal.
Building good relationships isn't an add-on, it's something that you have to work at, and it's something that you, I suppose, need to learn.
It's about giving students the space to feel safe and feel confident. I try to give space for them to be who they want to be and not who you want them to be.
But I also think if this study helps us to identify specific patterns, maybe to underline aspects of students' perspectives that we hadn't considered or we'd made assumptions about, then I think that helps us move forward.
I think you need to have a mixture of discipline and also understanding that when you're a teenager at secondary school, you've got a lot going on.
We think it's something that is very strong within our school, and it's very difficult to, if you like, capture that in a meaningful way when you're being evaluated by people. So, understanding that and how it works was obviously quite a lot of interest to us because we feel it is a very tangible thing about Linton, but it's difficult to put your finger on it. It's difficult to kind of measure it.
My own passionate interest was in the idea of pedagogy, which is a rather mythical word. People talk about pedagogy without actually knowing what it means now. It's become a catch-all for teaching and learning. But actually, if you go back to the roots of the meaning of the word, and this is the linguist in me, Pedagogues, as Plato described them, were people, and they were distinctive from teachers of the day. They were there to walk, literally walk alongside young people and help them grow, to coach them and mentor them, to enable them, to lead them out of childhood, which you would expect as well, because that's the root of education as a word as well, from the French douceur, meaning to lead out. You literally lead out of childhood through education, and that's what a teacher's there for, to walk alongside somebody, to be with them, to model what it is to be a learner with them, to engage in a partnership with them.
I came into this job because I like young people, I like kids, and part of what I want to do is to get to know you, get alongside you and help you with your learning. For me, it's all about getting to know students, and I think they need to know that as an adult working with them and supporting them, that I'm going to be fair, that I'm going to be consistent, and I'm going to be pretty much the same every day.
Remember that they are children, and I think that all teachers need to bear in mind that children make mistakes, that's what children do, and we are there to guide them and advise them, and they learn from those mistakes, hopefully, and that if you go into it with that in mind, then that is a lot more healthy, and you never hold grudges, ever. You know, every day is a new day, every lesson's a new lesson. That's really important. And I think that you also need to, and that's something I learned very, very early on as a teacher, you need to, absolutely model the behaviour that you want children to demonstrate.
Sometimes it pays to acknowledge that things have broken down to a point where we can work together to make this better. The general things like not doing homework and not engaging in class, well, they can be fixed easily by the teacher, but they usually stem from the student not really getting what they need back from a teacher in terms of the responses they need, either in their book, a nice, well done, that was a good effort, or an acknowledgement in some way, shape or form that they've made an effort to do something good.
Impact of a bad relationship. Well, it can completely stop any sense of learning, and that can spread out across the whole group as well.
It's something you've got to try and salvage, because I think once lost, it's really hard to regain.
What you need to do is present opportunities for children to take the hook. And I think relationships have to be at the core of what you do, because you are both responsible for the education. You're both responsible for the learning.
So I wanted to explore what was the impact of the relationship quality between teacher and student, what did it lead to? And our work at Linton Village College has shown that those outstanding teachers who build outstanding relationships with the young people they teach also achieve outstanding outcomes with them.
My name's Guy Barton, I'm a chemistry teacher at Linton Village College. I'm the Key Stage 4 coordinator, and I've been teaching now for 9 years. What's no again? All in one go? Wow, quiet. In your book, before that, I used to work for Tate & Lyle Sugars, and I was a chemical engineer. And one thing I learnt from Tate & Lyle, I couldn't go in there with the manager's overall and say, I'm the manager, you will now do what I ask you to do. Because that was just going to rub people straight up the wrong way. What's urea? Well done. And what's the posh word for P? You need to understand people, really, to do that job well. And I think the same applies to teaching. Can I have a volunteer? Aaron?
He involves us in people demonstrations.
So can you exothermic the room? Go. He has exited the room. Yep. So what do you think EX means? Get him in, because he won't hear this bit, this is an important bit.
So we do actually get kind of pushed forward, and he works with us to help the rest of the class.
So endothermic can come, yeah, brilliant.
Allowed to come in now?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So I always like the idea of walking to my classroom, you're not too sure what's going to happen. Even I'm not too sure what's going to happen sometimes. And so we kind of go on this journey together. I don't know how this plays out really in terms of their relationship and how they see me, to be quite honest.
I want to ask you your perceptions of your relationship with Mr. Barton. What do you think that's like? What kind of a relationship do you have with him? What kind of a teacher is Mr. Barton?
He's different from other teachers because he has a sense of humour, which makes it much easier for us to relate with him as a teacher. Because then, when we go into a lesson, because we have a good relationship with him through him having a good humour. We enjoy learning with him.
Say something like a practical goes wrong or like doesn't go to plan or something. It takes like something funny to like try and cheer up the moods because like people will be disappointed because like the practice didn't work or something didn't quite go to plan.
I think I've got this right. I'm going to add this together. Right, this is reacting so much. Look, what's happened?
Nothing, you're holding it.
Thank you. Yeah, the block's frozen to the bottom of that. That is so cold. No, it is. This is really cold. Well, I'm not going to let it go, am I?
We would make it funny, but then we'd still do just some written work to try and explain what the practical was trying to teach us.
You've picked up on humour, but do you know what? If I were to go and tell other teachers in the United Kingdom to go and be funny with their class, I'm not sure they'd take me seriously, nor would they necessarily understand what they'd need to do as teachers, because how do I go and tell a teacher? Do you know what it is? It's just you need to build up your repertoire of jokes. You've got to lighten up. There's got to be other things that Mr. Barton does that you recognise that is leading to your positive relationship with him.
Well, say you were stuck on a topic or a problem, he won't stop trying to teach you that on a personal level. Say just you as an individual in the class didn't understand that topic. He won't stop trying to teach you that until like you understand it.
Anything else? What other things is Mr. Barton doing that means that you have a good relationship with him?
I think he's fair because he treats the class all equally. He doesn't have his favourites or anything like that. He doesn't overcomplicate things. He always talks at the student level, and like Amelia said, he gives ways of understanding it, so he's never sort of overcomplicating it or make it easier for others and make that, which of course makes it harder for others. He's always fair with all the students.
Hi, I'm Heidi Baber. I'm a PE teacher at Linton Village College. I've been teaching here for about 3 years now. Beautiful, Ben. Such an athlete. I like to think I know my pupils quite well, whether they're keen sports people or just people who unfortunately just have to do PE. So I can see you looking forward to it, Bryony. You'd be surprised what you can sort of get people to do if you actually can tap into what gets them going and what, even if it's things unrelated to your subject, I think that's quite important. Keep your hands off the knees, either cross them across your chest or against the wall, just keep your knees out so they don't bend in. There's not a lot you can do, just hold it, you know, it's going to hurt, that's sort of such the burns anyway. If you kind of just treat them like, well, they're not good at this, they're not good at like netball, hockey, then they're not going to feel valued. How much longer you got left? Another 2? Go, go, go. Oh, another 30 seconds, lucky you. I think you always have a natural affinity to those pupils or students that are similar to you, either personality or kind of expectations. So obviously those that are more naturally sporty, you're going to maybe lean slightly towards them or kind of form a stronger relationship. But I think if I make a conscious effort to spread them around so they're not, and then they can work with groups and then I can focus on different groups as well. And I've tried to make a real effort to move in my teaching to make sure I circulate really well because I am conscious of the tendency I have to gravitate towards these pupils. Don't you look so panicked? Yeah.
So let's just talk about your relationship with your PE teacher. You should know her pretty well now. Yeah. Just describe the kind of relationship you have with Miss Baber. What kind of a teacher is she?
Nice. I feel like you can almost talk to her about a lot of things, but not everything, because obviously she's a teacher. But you do have this sort of relationship where if you need her, you could go and talk to her.
Okay.
I don't. No. I don't think everyone in our class feels the same way about her.
Okay.
It's because of her favourite thing.
Because she definitely has favourites.
If you're going into rounders, you get put into your classes and then you have teams. She'll go over to say one of her like good students. She'll go with Ellie, and then she'll leave the rest
for everything.
who can't, the rest who
help
she
that.
doesn't like, she'll just leave to play by themselves and go and help the people who are already good.
I don't really think that's necessarily true,
Oh,
but
no,
I think, yeah, she like
she definitely has. She definitely has.
but she'll improve on the people who are good at sports skills.
I think it's alright at the moment. She does she praises you when you do something right. But if we said anything to her, I think it might be more of a. She just feels like she has to praise us for everything.
I think year 9 would probably be my strongest relationship. It's my tutor groups after the year, and I've taught that group from year 7, so I've had the longest contact time with them as a whole group. And there's a high percentage of pupils that I see on a regular basis through clubs that I have into contact with numerous hours outside of school. It'd be interesting to find out the results.
It felt a bit like, is this really necessary to ask these questions?
I never really appreciated how much that relationship with certain teachers helped my learning develop. You take it for granted, to be honest.
Now, bearing in mind that your view was that potentially this was going to be the strongest relationship.
Yeah.
Now, what do you see?
Lots of peaks and troughs.
Interestingly, the peaks and troughs are broadly similar to your year 10s in the way in which you see the relationship as being one way. But then the students are the blue.
That's interesting, yeah.
The perception gap, the large perception gap here, is between their perception and your perception. And actually, the interesting thing is that you are clearly somebody who can form really good relationships with young people. We've seen that in 2 great examples here. But this is still good, but it is clearly the weaker of the 3.
Yeah, yeah.
Far from 9BG being the strongest relationship, it is potentially the one that is the most dysfunctional. What do you think they're saying that is so different to you?
I suppose when I think of this class, I maybe have in mind a group of individuals, but obviously that positive experience you get with those pupils outside of school, and whether that translates into the classroom. I think it maybe does more so with that particular group than with the whole group. It's quite interesting. Maybe there's some pupils that I actually kind of neglect to focus on or don't really think about when I have in mind this group. And it's probably those pupils that have a weaker relationship. So yes. I think it could simply be that these kids are making decisions in P's and on the top of their priority list. Therefore, their views of the subject and my views of the subject are going to differ, which could also be another reason for sort of perception, and what I value is very much different to what they value, especially at that key point in their education.
Ironically, she had created some of the strongest relationships with young people in other contexts, stronger than some of the other teachers. But with this one class, there was clearly an issue. And it was clear that issue was the context in which she was building relationships. She saw this class irregularly, and in the off period, she had seen some of that class on a more regular basis. She was taking them for extracurricular netball and hockey, and they knew her in a different context. And what was happening was she was coming back to that class the following Wednesday, and with half that class, she had built a richer, deeper, broader relationship. They knew things about each other because they'd experienced different emotions, highs, lows. But with the other half of the class, that relationship had not moved on. And what it did, or what it seemed that our data showed, was that class suddenly felt more marginalised. It created a split between the class, between those who perceived themselves to be elite sportsmen, or at least were perceived to be elite sportsmen and women, and those who were just people in the PE class. And actually what it done was fragment the class. Now there's positives and negatives there. On the one hand, we saw a teacher who was able to build that rich, deep, broad relationship. It tells us that if you do focus on the extracurricular and you do prioritise it, it can be the most powerful way of building relationships with young people. But it has to be managed.
When people are reflecting about what they remember at school, it's often things that happen outside the classroom, isn't it? So I think it's about building memories and really positive ones as well.
Extracurricular things are absolutely vital, going on trips. So things like that, I think giving students the opportunity to see that we are human beings as well.
They make an effort to find out your interests outside of school, as well as like what can help you learn inside school as well. It's almost like there needs to be a middle ground between like talking to you and getting to know you too much and too personally.
I think it's recognising there are lots of different ways and different contexts in teaching and learning to enable students to flourish and to thrive, and that's going to look very different in the kind of coaching conversations I see in art lessons as opposed to the dynamic nature of a PE lesson, or perhaps the potentially a little bit more didactic traditional teaching. But I don't think you have to teach a certain way or indeed need to interact in the same way in order to gain the good relationships. And I think it's recognising the quality rather than trying to stipulate a certain method.
I talk with my hands a lot, don't I?
Yeah.
I think that's me trying to bring them into the
Undoubtedly.
conversation.
You're cueing people in.
And trying to be open.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be positive, I guess, with my body language as well.
There's a lovely moment where you also admit that you've made a mistake.
So is it about bubbles leaving? Or, sorry, gases, my fault, yeah, gases. Is it about gases leaving?
And I think that's great, because in that moment there were mistakes from everybody on the table, but no one seemed to care. It was a lovely sense that you all collectively got to the right answer in the end through a completely open, transparent dialogue. The amount of conversation that happened and dialogue in the classroom during that time was phenomenal. The number of people who had claimed during that period to have had a personal interaction with you, a proper dialogue of open communication, question, answer, debate, was significant. It promotes inquiry, and it's clearly enabling pupils to make great progress. When we tried to engage schools in the research, the natural question they had for us is, well, what will the impact be on standards? What will the impact be on outcomes? And to be quite frank, we're not interested in the outcomes from that perspective. Nevertheless, when we've gone into schools, the powerful messages of this research are, if you prioritise relationships, then academic outcomes will go up.
The central task is to show that this is an effective thing for a school to be doing. But how to do that without falling into the trap of saying, well, you can only do it because of academic outcomes. See, it works. This is a much wider vision than that.
Education is not just about producing pupils that can pass exams, it's about producing pupils that have got a capacity to be independent, responsible citizens who go into the world with confidence.
We have narrowed our view of education. We are driven by different things. And there is a need now to talk about it differently, present evidence about it in ways that we didn't have to do in the past.
Very few schools take this on as a topic because relationships, people are nervous about the word. It sounds really fluffy, it sounds really intangible. What we hope to do through our metrics is actually put the tangible back into that narrative. This represents pictorially your relationships to your year 10 and 11 class. When we're assessing this particular thing, what we're looking here is at things like the atmosphere being highly conducive to open and honest communication. There is a sense that when they present themselves to you here and you're engaged in conversation, there are no hidden agendas. You can engage in a conversation that is both open, transparent, but also is highly thought-provoking, intellectually stimulating. They're clearly responding to your questioning, your prompting in the most positive way. This for me is the grounding of where the relationship is being built. And it's leading to, in the second instance, this points, and this is again one of the highest results we've seen, this points to a classroom of fairness, equity, people feeling like they are all treated equally and openly.
I think I mentioned it earlier on where I talked about trying to provide a safe environment where students are able to discuss and explore ideas so they can get something incorrect, but I will congratulate them for trying.
Touch your face. Hot or warm? Hot or warm? Hot or warm? Hot, warm or cold? Warm. Warm, good. Put the stuff in. Right, now touch that. Get out of my way. Cold. It's cold. Good.
I think that the results made an awful lot of sense to me, that seeing that a better relationship means that you do better, because I think that means that you're in a comfortable learning environment. And I think that's one of the most important things, is to feel comfortable where you're learning and feel like you can ask questions and you can get it wrong and you can make mistakes or just really be a bit clueless about what's going on. But at the same time, you can feel confident that you know your stuff and they're not trying to catch you out, or they're not constantly pushing you, and they recognise the fact that you're doing well.
It's trying to set up your classroom, I think, so you can have those conversations and trying to understand what the student is thinking. Let them talk.
You're head of faculty here, you're also Guy's first mentor. From your observations of him, right from the start all the way through, what are the kinds of things that he is doing that you observe that lead to these kinds of outcomes?
He does do what he needs to do to keep them interested, but he can do that because of the relationship he's built with that class over 2 years. He knows they'll go with it. He builds the trust and he builds that respect, that big point at the end there. For me, that's where it all comes down to, really. If you've got that, you can do whatever you like in the classroom and it will work. I think it's that, really, that he can take them with him and they'll trust that it's going to work.
If a relationship, or if there's a problem in the classroom, and you might, for argument's sake, put them outside, or you might talk to them at the end of the lesson, the key thing is you step outside and you repair that relationship as soon as possible.
And I think that good parents know that. They know that, giving children a little bit of space and showing them that even though they're being difficult, that the doors aren't closed and they can be forgiven and the relationship's still important and there's love in that, and it's using a bit of analogy. If children feel that their teachers genuinely are warm and loving towards them, to use a very old-fashioned phrase, actually I think that they will thrive and they'll feel that they can make mistakes within an environment that allows them to take risks.
People sometimes don't understand 90% of the behaviour management is that positive stuff, even when you've told someone off. It's the rebuilding afterwards. It's not the telling off in the first place.
And what's exciting for me, listening to you talking, is that if you look at both classes, and two areas of real strength is where we understand what we call the likely impact of the interruption on the relationship. And what you notice here is, again, these are two significant peaks, almost, we note, at the same level in both classes. This means that students say to us through this data that when there are breaks in your relationship, however small or however large, they feel they can pick up with you again exactly where you left off. Both classes reporting this is a significant strength of your teaching. Our work at Linton Village College has shown that those outstanding teachers who build outstanding relationships with the young people they teach also achieve outstanding outcomes with them. We did some work with a chemist, Guy Barton, at Linton Village College, and we overlaid the attainment data with the relational data that we took. We rank ordered students, from the students who had the very best relationships to those who had the more dysfunctional relationships with that member of staff. And there was absolute correlation between those students who were underperforming and having weaker, slightly more dysfunctional relationships with the teacher, and those students who were overperforming, actually achieving above and beyond what the school expected. We've talked a lot about what we think you're doing well in the classroom that creates these relationships. I want to show you now the tangible impact of this. So, as you know, the school shared with me the performance data of your classes, and I wanted to share with you Year 10 in particular because I think it's quite an interesting pattern that we're seeing. You've got students who should be polling at C, and actually here they are close to A. And you know what? They are those who are in the top 3 of quality relationship, in terms of their quality relationship with you. This isn't just some sort of woolly correlation, this is absolute stark picture. I think this is one of the most interesting relational teacher data sets we've seen, and what we do when we map it to academic performance, we see an absolute correlation between students doing